I'm Buriana Mumerin. Like many somatic experiencing practitioners, I first discovered somatic experiencing through my own healing journey. I was inspired by this method that I decided to study it and become an SCP myself. Witnessing the growth, transformation, and healing of my clients deeply inspired me to bring this method to Bulgaria so that more people can experience its benefits and discover the hope that trauma can be healed. Both my personal healing and the healing I have witnessed in others motivated me to create and initiate the Bulgarian Institute for Somatic Education. Together with people who share my vision and are committed to spreading somatic experiencing in Bulgaria, we are working to make healing and transformation through SC accessible to more people here in Bulgaria.
Good.
I have learned so much from the work of Dr. Peter Levin, not only from his professional contribution, but also from his profound humanity. And I'm really happy that I'm here today with my colleague, mentor, and dear friend Galina Denzel. And together we are truly honored to have the opportunity to speak with Dr. Levin.
Thank you, Bori, and welcome. Welcome, Dr. Levin. It's a true honor to be here and to be able to participate in this first interview with you that's going to come to our Bulgarian current colleagues and future colleagues. There's a total of 5 of us who are somatic experiencing practitioners who are in Bulgaria, and I'm here in the United States, and was just back in my country meeting them, and it was just fantastic. And we cannot wait for what will be the foundation of somatic experiencing in Bulgaria and on the Balkans. And this interview is a part of a very bright future. I'm going to say a few words about Dr. Peter Levin, and then Bori, the mic is yours to interview the person who's inspired both of us and has brought so much healing to us and our clients. Dr. Peter Levin is a pioneer in the field of trauma healing. He holds doctorates in medical, biophysics, and psychology, and he developed somatic experiencing, a body-based approach that helps people restore balance, resilience, and a sense of safety by reconnecting with the wisdom of the body. His groundbreaking research has transformed how we understand trauma, showing that trauma is physiological, not just a psychological experience. His insight that trauma is not in the event itself, but in the nervous system's response to it, has changed the way healing is approached around the world. Dr. Levin is the author of several best-selling books on trauma, including the classic Waking the Tiger, Healing Trauma, published in over 29 languages. In an unspoken voice, How the Body Releases Trauma and Restores Goodness, Trauma and Memory, Brain and Body in a Search for the Living Past, and his latest and most moving, I think, an autobiography of trauma, A Healing Journey. Through his decades of work, he has touched the lives of countless practitioners, 200,000 people now able to bring somatic experiencing in the world, and countless trauma survivors, reminding us all of our natural capacity for healing, connection, and wholeness. Dr. Levin, the mic is yours, and Bodis, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's a privilege to speak with you.
Thank you so much. And it's a privilege for Bulgaria to be part of the 55 countries representing this incredible method. Dr. Levin, thank you so much for being here with us today. I would like to start with the questions. For Bulgarians who are new to your work, how would you describe somatic experiencing as an approach to working with trauma?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I don't think it's not new anymore in one level, but then also in another, it is in certain regions where it's just starting to make an impact. So, the way I would describe, when I started developing my work, which became somatic experiencing, it was in the late 1960s and then into the 70s and up to this time. And I had the disadvantage, no, I had the advantage, not the disadvantage, the advantage of not having known the definition of trauma as PTSD, because that was still another 12, 13 years in the future. So I didn't know that trauma was supposed to be a brain disorder, maybe even a brain disease that couldn't be cured, that at best could be managed with medications or by helping people change their negative thoughts, their negative beliefs about themselves. And both of those can be of some use, but it misses the fundamental effect of the effect that trauma has on the body.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you had parents or an older sibling that was often hit you as a young child, and if maybe that happened once or twice, it doesn't leave a lasting impression. But if it becomes habitual, it becomes chronic, then the person this pattern becomes a bracing pattern. And then it gets literally locked in the body, in the muscles, in the joints. And then it's sending a message to the brain that's saying that the threat is continuing, that the trauma is happening right now. So that's in a very simple nutshell about why the body is central. And look at all kinds of trauma and all kinds of symptoms, they're all rooted in bodily processes. So the question then is, again, how do we work with it? Because it's in the body, we need to work with it in the body. And again, there are other modalities that can be useful, including cognitive behavior therapy, cognitive processing therapy, and so forth. But by and large, they miss the main point. The salient point is that these traumas are embodied. They're locked in the body, and they have to shift. So, for example, I'm again giving this somewhat of a trivial example in this bracing pattern. So a person might become aware of that with the therapist's help. And as they do that, often they come in presenting with pain, because when you have habitual contractions, that will lead to pain. And that's another typical symptom, potential symptom of trauma, is physical pain. Again, it's because the body is locked in habitual, our guts are twisted, our heart is accelerating and out of rhythm. Again, all of the things that the body is doing that informs the brain, informs the mind that the threat is present. So that really is kind of the fundamental understanding of why in somatic experiencing we work with the body. And it's a bottom-up approach, but it also really is important because it's also going to help people who work with a top-down approach. Really, effective therapy really needs to hold both together. And one of the things about somatic experiencing, I don't see it as a therapy per se, although obviously since it's reached many, many people, it seems in some way that it is. It is a form of therapy, but it's rather to help people learn to do how they do what they do, to do what they do better, more effective. And so it really crosses the spectrum of almost all of the other therapies that are existing. And it can be cultivated on its own or used to support other modalities.
Yes, talking about the other modalities, many people were familiar with cognitive therapy, analysis, or applying focusing or mindfulness when working with trauma. What makes somatic experiencing different for the client and what makes it different for the therapist working with the modality?
Right. Well, looking at cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, again, that's a method that I think has great value.
Yeah.
It's really more of it's like more of a contemplative, meditative, to be aware of one's thoughts. That's important, but it's only one small piece of the pie. The big part is, again, how it gets riveted in the body. And then that's what's fueling those negative thoughts, those negative beliefs, and so forth. So we can work with the beliefs, that can be of value, but until it changes in the body, until we're still bracing, we will continue to brace. I can change my thought, and my therapist can say to me, well, that was a long time ago. You don't need to hold your shoulders like that. So then what's my reaction? Probably hold it even more. So somatic experiencing has to do with completion. So in other words, if the tension increased, then it might go up, 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 and up. But what if it just went up a smallest amount, and then just letting it rest there for a minute and then releasing it? And then again, noticing the sensations and feelings and thoughts and images and memories that come up. And again, just slowly, slowly raising and bracing, and then again, releasing and letting go. And again, connecting with the different sensations and feelings that are now changed and that reside in the body and are the way out. I liked what you said, that it's really about restoring balance, resilience, connection, and wholeness, because we are whole. We have never not been whole. We may think that we're not whole because of what trauma does to us. It fragments us. It's like hitting a glass and the shards of glass break off. People feel these broken. And in somatic experiencing, people begin to discover that they're unbroken, that they are able to restore the sense of a deep self and of a whole human being. So again, changing the thoughts by itself isn't going to be of that much value. It could be of some value, but it also can have another effect. So if the therapist tries to tell a person, well, you need to have new thoughts. I'm exaggerating this. And then the person really can't change it, or they change it and it continues to reappear. So again, what is that? And how is it that we can stop those cycles and then connect the sensorial, the bodily awareness with the awareness of thoughts? So my understanding is that that's absolutely essential, that just trying to change the thoughts. I mean, when you try to not do something, what happens usually? You do it more, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. When you bring your work to a new country, such as Bulgaria, do you find that it's necessary to adapt your approach to the local culture and history, or is somatic experiencing universal to all people in all cultures?
Both,
Mm.
both. Yes, I mean, every person and every region has a history, and that history continues to play through in terms of generational patterns of trauma and stress. There's no question about that. So each country, each region has its own, how to say, its own um, history. And but at the same time, I believe that somatic experiencing, referencing the body, is also a universal language. And that's one of the reasons you mentioned at the beginning that it's taught in 55 countries. So yes, one has to have cultural sensitivities for sure, but clearly something that's going on that's much bigger than culture, that's much bigger in a way than history. Although again, those are important. So, my experience, I mean, quite frankly, when I first started teaching in other countries, I think it was like late 70s, maybe early 80s. And I was invited to present at a conference in Germany, in Bavaria, Garmisch-Partenkirchen, so the humanistic medicine, conference on humanistic medicine. And for me, I mean, I had gone to Europe many years before that, just as a student. And then one thing led to another, and I started to do teaching in Switzerland. And I had the impression, the delusion, that the people in Switzerland were just like me. They were just like Americans. They looked like Americans. I mean, they had a different accent when they talked. But after 20 years, I realized I was just beginning to grasp that culture. And I think that in some ways, when we are outside of a culture and look at the culture, we can see the culture in ways that they can't see their own culture. But they're also the other way around, that I don't want to go under the illusion that I understand their culture, because I don't. It's a very, very gradual thing. This was especially true in Brazil. But again, this was obviously a culture that was very, very, very different. And somatic experiencing really took off there. And there are probably thousands of practitioners in Brazil. And in Brazil, people are much more embodied in a way. They much more live in their bodies. You see it in the music and the dance. You see it in the sensuality. And so they adapted somatic experiencing very easily, very quickly. In some of the other cultures, especially cultures that were shame-based, very much shame-based, it was difficult for them to start. But then when they realized, my God, that they don't have to carry this shame, then I mean, in Switzerland alone, I mean, Switzerland, as you know, is this little teeny little country here. There are probably, I think there were, I'm not positive about it, but I think there were like 2,000 practitioners. So it's getting to the point where everybody in Zurich or everybody in Switzerland will either be taking therapy or will be a therapist in SE, So, and again, it grows. One of the things I suspect that's happened, I was asked to teach last year at the medical school, the psychiatry department at the University of Zurich. And my beginning, as you described me, I come from an academic background, a scientific background, but I've developed my work outside of academia, outside of the traditional medical models. But so I think what happened is that many of these psychiatrists were seeing patients, and the patients were very difficult. Their change was very slow, and then probably what happened is some of them all of a sudden observed that their patients were doing much better, that they were starting to heal. And so they started, I think, to get curious about that. And then they asked them, and then they said, well, they were doing SE sessions, So again, I think it comes in a way in the back door because it works. I mean, we do have research. For example, I think 2 articles in the Journal of Traumatic Stress Studies, which is the gold standard for trauma research. And it showed really tremendous benefit. So I think in a way it is coming into the mainstream. The New York Times, which is one of the few real free presses in the United States, And they had a whole article basically about working with the body, about somatic experiencing and me. And so again, it used to be on the fringe, but now it's being accepted in places like medical schools. Also last year, I also taught in Vienna at the Sigmund Freud Medical School, you know. So again, I think these things they've grown on their own, and now they're in a way returning to their roots, which was academic and scientific and phenomenological, really working with inner experience and how inner experience is experience in the body.
And do you notice common patterns in how trauma manifests across the world? You mentioned shame, for example.
Yeah. I mean, that's a typical one that I've noticed primarily in the Germanic cultures, Germany and Switzerland. And I have to laugh. You know, shame and guilt is used in a way to organize society, and coming from a country where there's so much chaos, it really looks like a very good balance. I mean, no culture, no country is perfect, but I think all countries have something valuable to give. And I think that's also something that's happening in somatic experiencing. It's not just somatic experiencing is giving to these other countries, but their unique perspective on their humanity and others' humanity also supports the growth of somatic experiencing.
Yeah, so true. And what inspired you to dedicate your life to developing somatic experiencing? Probably this is very common question, but still interesting for me and probably for us.
Yeah.
And in creating an organization which has trained tens of thousands of professionals across the world, as we said, 200,000 around the world.
Yeah. Well, somebody asked this question a little bit of a different way, and sort of is like, how come you study trauma for the main part of your life, for the biggest part of your life? And I thought about that the first time I was asked, and then the answer came, no, I wasn't here to study trauma. Trauma invented me to study it. And you kind of alluded to this a little bit, that it's important as therapists that we do our own healing work. In a Greek mythological figure is Chiron, archetype of Chiron, who, at least the way I understand him, as the wounded healer. And that's the part of all of us that carry these wounds. Now, trauma as PTSD, that is a very specific diagnostic category. But most of us, many of us, but probably most of us have experienced, well, the word trauma comes from the root wound or injury. And we've all experienced those wounds and injuries, and to different degrees, they affect our approach to relationships, our approach to life. And so how can we, again, they live in the body, all of these things, whether it's PTSD or whether it's that we were shamed. So for example, the child that's shamed, and you see this posture anywhere in the world, everywhere in the world, it's like this. The eyes avert, looking directly at the person, they look away and down, and the body collapses like this. So one of the things I discovered was, okay, well, what's the best way to work with that? Because if you just bring up shame to a person, it often intensifies the shame. But when I realized that it was a bodily response, like this bracing pattern, that you could slowly, small amount, I call titration, touch into this bodily posture of shame, and then slowly coming back and opening and opening. And usually people describe going from shame to pride and dignity, because they're all somatic states. They're all somatic states. Again, they have cognitive tags. Um, they have certain emotions, but basically there's autonomic and sensorial. The autonomic nervous system, the nervous system gets overwhelmed, and it keeps in this agitated state or in a state of shutdown. So again, where we have to map where the person is. Are they in a state of hyperarousal, or are they a state of shutdown and despair and depression? Again, all somatic states. When I was doing my doctoral dissertation, 1970, something like that, 75, I came across this amazing article by a woman named Nina Bull. I talk about her work in an unspoken voice. Actually, somebody I just did a workshop, and somebody handed me an unspoken voice in Korean. So, so anyhow, what she did is she taught people to observe to some degree their body sensations, as we do in somatic experiencing. And then she also trained other people to observe that person. So that would be like the therapist in a way. And so when they would give them a word like anger, their body would go in, the jaws would clench, the fist would clench, and they continued to feel anger. You couldn't change it. If you had them imagine something joyful, they couldn't change it because it was still locked in the body. So slowly, we learn how these things are locked in the body and how we can meet and greet them and give a possibility of change. I'm not sure what your question was. I have to think back on that. But in any case, it's, once we're in that particular postural set, you can't just voluntarily change it. So if a person is like this, you try to say, well, stand up straight. That doesn't work. Again, it may even make things worse because you're trying to override a very powerful sensory and emotion. You have to be able to come out of that response first. So yes, you could go from anger to joy, but you had to deconstruct the bodily response to anger or fear. Again, fear is one that's immobilizing. She didn't study shame, but shame, of course, is another one. And again, that's a specific posture. It involves the body, it involves the nervous system, especially the autonomic nervous system. And we have to change it to be able to change our relationship to those.
To accept and be with what's in the body, not to
Well,
run from it.
to come to completion, because
Yeah,
this response here is an incomplete response.
yeah.
So it has to actually now increase a little bit more and then release a little bit. So again, we have to be able to help people go from a pattern of bracing or retraction or a gut wrench to complete that so they can come back into the here and now and to be present in the here and now.
Yes, absolutely. And that makes difference from something that you read about and something that experiencing in the body. That completion, it's not possible through just reading about somatic experiencing.
Right. That's right. There's a saying from Papua New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, that knowledge doesn't exist until it's in the muscles, basically until the body. Knowledge does not exist until it's rooted in the body. That's a pretty succinct way of putting it.
Mm.
And you know, in this middle of the 1600s, of course, Descartes, the famous French philosopher, he said that I think, therefore I am. That's basically the cognitive approach. You can change your thoughts, and you're going to change your amness. I think, therefore I am. And then around that same time, the mathematician, philosopher, oh gosh, what was his name? Blaise Pascal. He wrote a letter to Descartes and said something like, Monsieur Descartes, you are screwing people up. You're completely, I mean, really, somewhere I found that transcript of that letter. And he said, what the truth is that the body has its reason, which reason cannot reason. The body has its reasons, or the heart has its reason, which reason cannot reason. So around that time, I think we was the first person to go against this current emphasis on the intellectual. And I mean, and Descartes also, I think it was important because he was again trying to get people to think for themselves. But that's not the whole story. That's even the small piece of the story.
Yeah, some of the therapists that are going to, some of the teachers actually that are going to teach somatic experiencing next year and the following years say that this is the missing piece, the language of the body. Yeah.
That's right. You know, 2015. So 2015, I think I received one of the Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Psychotherapy Networker. It's a pretty traditional. It's more liberal than the American Psychological Association. But anyhow, they awarded me a Lifetime Achievement Award, and so they were going to present it to me in Washington, D.C. And they have a magazine that comes out quarterly. And the magazine that came out around the time I received the award, the cover, one of those picture puzzles, you have many, many pieces put together. And one piece was missing. And the subtitle was The Missing Piece, the Body. So again, I think even mainstream therapeutic modalities are learning about this.
You're talking a lot about the traditional cultures in your book, Autobiography of Trauma, and how they honor the body and the traditions and the land. And you have a lot of many interesting stories of meeting such people and learning from them.
Absolute. Look, from time immemorial, back probably thousands of years, even into the Stone Age, maybe even before, people have had to deal, well, in the Greek myths, literature of Ulysses. That whole book is about trauma. And people have found ways to deal with trauma, and they've had to. And often they involve ritual, they involve movement, they involve chanting, and many so-called shamanic cultures, shamans take that role of being the therapist for the community, but being more than that, being advisors, being even judges, medicine men and medicine women. And so So again, they use different techniques, and many of these, or some of these techniques, many of these techniques have differences, but also have similarities to somatic experiencing. So about 12, 14 years ago, I was given permission to visit the Kranaki people in the northeast of Brazil, in the Brazilian jungles. And because I wanted to, there's a in Portuguese and in Spanish, there's a word sustos, which is another word for trauma. It means fright, paralysis, and soul loss. I would say that that's quite direct. Really, really. Fright, paralysis, and soul loss. That's what trauma is about. And so they use different divination and rituals to help people heal from that. But when I went and I got to be able to talk to the chief of the Kranaki people, and I asked him about this, and he said, yes, he knows of the word sustus. His daughter, the princess, was the first person to go to college. And so she also taught him about, explained to him about trauma. And so he said, yes, he knows about sustus and he knows about trauma. But he said it in a nice way. He said, but I think they both missed the point. And the point is that trauma happens when there's a rupture in the fabric of the society, of the tribe. And so for many years, they were banished from their land. The farmers and the loggers took over, and they fought this for many, many years in the courts. And finally, eventually, they won, and the land had to be restored to them. But the way the farmers, in the way of revenge, just destroyed much of the trees, much of the foliage of the animals, the plants, and the culture in a way. And so the chief explained to me that really it's not about the individual, but it's about the collective. And we have to heal in collective. And I think that's the thing that's really missing in our approach to trauma throughout the world. It's not something that happens to the individual. I spent some time teaching at the Hopi Guidance Center. This is the Hopi First Nations tribe. And when I would teach, I would demonstrate with somebody, but nobody would volunteer. And so I thought, well, maybe it's because they were shy, or you don't want to hang out your dirty laundry, so to speak, where other people could see it. But then I met this anthropologist who had worked in that area. And he said, you have to understand that Hopi doesn't see themselves as an individual, but as a community, as a village, really, and as a tribe. And so the next week when I was teaching, I asked, because these were very, very astute clinicians, I asked them if they wanted to present a case of somebody that they were seeing. And this therapist presented the person. And then I said, I wonder if anybody has had similar things happen to them, so that if I worked with that person, it could help the other person. Then 3 or 4 people immediately volunteered. So again, we become so individualistic. Has great value, but it also limits our capacity to heal. And when in the Kranaki people, that healing occurred when they were restoring their rituals and their ways of dealing with what we would call sustus, or fright, paralysis, and soul loss, how to bring, in a way, the soul back into the body.
Yes, talking about the collective trauma, Bulgaria has a complex history. How could somatic experiencing help societies, the collective healing of trauma?
Right, right. Well, I think rituals are important.
Yeah.
I really do, but they have to be appropriate. In other words, we don't just grab something about chanting and drumming, and then and then we kind of commandeer it. No, we have to find our own. We can use theirs as a model, but we have to find our own expression, our own rituals.
We have a lot of rituals in Bulgaria, but probably
Oh,
forbidden. Yes, not forbidden, but forgotten. Forgotten.
forgot. Yes,
Forgotten, yes.
forgotten.
So probably we need to remind them and start doing it again in
Yes, yes. So many things have gone underground.
Mm.
Yeah. I think when I've worked with many therapists, and particularly women therapists or other women healers, it seems like there's a shadow over them from the time when the witches were burned here and in Europe also. And, because it went against the patriarchal powers to be. And I think we're now hopefully coming into a range where people are more cooperating, like the intuitive is being more connected with the pragmatic, and so on. And I think that's really where growth occurs. Again, in many cultures, people were afraid to do things that were more intuitive, that there was an overbalance of the left brain function. And whereas the healing comes from both, but it's primarily a right brain. And so again, how to bring those two halves of the brain together. I see you have a picture of the brain here on your wall here. And the heart, it looks like. Great, that's nice. Yeah. So, so again, I think that's where I was glad that I had a scientific background. So in teaching somatic experiencing, I was able to call from that background. And at the same time, it's very much of an intuitive process. But intuition can be learned. It can be fostered. And we need, for intuition to work, we need to have both information and sensation.
We know how important is the presence of the therapist, but is there any simple daily practice from somatic experiencing that you could share with our audience and that they could start doing as a daily practice?
Good question. One word, awareness. So, for example, you go outdoors and you see on a blade of grass little drops of water of dew, and you're just touched by that. So take some time to linger. How do you feel that touchedness in your own body? When you're walking on the street and you meet a friend who is a close friend, but you haven't seen for a long time, and you really feel glad. How does that reside? How does that live in the body? So really just going through every day with awareness.
Lovely. What was the most surprising discovery about human resilience
Yeah.
through your work?
Well, that it's innate. I think that was the most important discovery, that we are resilient.
Mm.
Most mammals that at least survive are resilient, maybe in different ways, but they are resilient. So I think that's a shared instinctual process, that the nervous system, when it goes out of balance, it knows in a way how to come back into balance. When we go out into feeling broken, there's a part that's whole and unbroken. So contacting those parts is an important aspect of helping people heal.
I remember I was attending workshop with you in London, and you showed a picture of Japanese art.
Konsengi.
Yes, yes, it was
Konsengi.
lovely.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yes,
lovely.
that's very nice. Yeah, I actually had one of my Japanese students gave me one of those,
Oh,
so I
really?
have it here on my shelf. Yeah, this is, this is a tradition, and it's even honored today, but from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So if somebody would come to visit, you would offer them tea, and they pour the tea into a ceramic teacup, which was made by hand. And as things do, they would sometimes crack or break. And so instead of trying to fill them again with clay, with ceramic, they filled the injuries with a type of gold. And to me, that speaks not just of impermanence, but about when we are wounded, when we have this crack, that's where the light shines through, as the song by Leonard Cohen goes. And I know that this is true for all people. I don't think that I've ever met somebody, not that I have an infinite population to draw from, but that could not be healed, could not heal themselves, because we don't heal the person, they heal themselves. We support that healing. The way, for example, if a bone is broken, we go to the doctor in the emergency room and they put on a cast. The cast isn't what cures the broken bone, it's what makes it possible for the broken bone support the healing. So I think as therapists, that's what we do. We support the healing, but the healing is intrinsic, it's innate, and it's with us all to feel again unbroken.
I was really touched by the last paragraph in your last book, Autobiography of Trauma, that through this book you want to spread the hope of healing to all people injured in some way.
Yes.
Do you want to say something about that?
Well, this world is in dire need of healing. And I think it was August 30th, I did a program in Zurich for a few hundred people with a colleague named Thomas Hugel on how we deal with collective fear and distrust and grief, and how to process that as a group. So it's not a matter of being convinced. I know that can happen. Without the tools, trauma rules. But when we have the right tools, trauma can be healed. I'm not saying it necessarily happens all at once. Sometimes it does. But people who have had injuries throughout their lives, and neglect and abandonment and so forth, it does take more time. But the deeper the wound, also the deeper the healing. And though I think that's one thing I would like the world to understand. The deeper the wound, the deeper the healing.
Yes, and now we are talking about post-traumatic growth. that we
Mhm.
actually develop through trauma.
Yeah, that's a kind of a study now that's been going on for the last decades or so, and it's true. But also, if the trauma still is living in the body, we may grow, but we may also still, how do I want to say this, still be holding the trauma. So it's important to release the trauma from the body and also to grow.
What is the most important lesson you hope to leave for your students and the practitioners of somatic experiencing?
Well, just to continue what they're doing
Mm.
and doing their own healing work.
Oh,
You know, again, that the autobiography, I don't know, I don't think it's out in Bulgarian yet. I don't know, maybe it isn't.
yes,
Oh,
we
it is.
have it. Yes, yes.
Oh,
We
okay.
have 3 or 4 books of yours
Oh,
translated
great.
to Bulgarian. Yes.
Okay. Well, maybe you can just put that out in your portal or whatever.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, anyhow, you know, in the autobiography, at the end, with all of my travels and all of my confronting my demons, I came back to this 18-month-old part of myself that was completely innocent and curious. And we are that. We are curious beings. Most mammals are. And we're also enthusiastic about life. The word enthusiastic comes from entheus, with God. So again, to come back to these roots and to re-honor them. Yes. Okay.
Very touching. I just completed walking the Camino. I don't know if
Oh,
you're familiar. Yes, and what you just said reminded me of Camino somehow.
right.
To
Is this the one
reconnect,
in,
to
yeah,
reconnect, yes, with
yeah,
our true selves and God.
right.
Yeah.
All right.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
So good to connect with you all and to the
Thank
people
you.
of Bulgaria.
may I ask just one more question about talking directly to the people who are considering to begin to study in the professional training? What do you wish to tell those people who are just beginning their journey and here in Bulgaria?
Yeah. Well, all journeys begin somewhere,
Yes.
you know, and if not now, when? You know, here's the thing. If people just study that first few modules, the first year, they will know if it's right for them.
Mm.
And this is somewhat of a guess, but I would imagine that probably 90 to 95% of the people realize, yes, this is something that's right for me. It can also support what other things I've been trained in. Because again, we have many people from different modalities, whether it's Gestalt, whether it's cognitive therapy, whether it's dance, movement therapy, art therapy. These are all things that can be enriched by the tools of somatic experiencing. So, but anyhow, I would say just take that first year training and know if it's for you. As I say, my guess is I would put pennies on it that that it will be for you. And not just for your clients, but for yourselves.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
Thank you so much. And personally, thank you for what you're doing and you've been doing for the last 50 years.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Levin. What an honor.
Yes.
I wish you all well.
Honor.
Okay.
Yes, be blessed. Thank you.